So welcome to this lesson where we're going to take a look at developing the profile page. Now, the reason why I'm starting out with the profile page is because with the dashboard it requires some JSON data, mainly for the graph and also for the event data at the bottom. I'm going to try and make it as dynamic as possible, so that is why I'm going to leave that until last. But however, the profile page is static. It's HTML and CSS, and then you can hand that page over to the back-end development team, and then they can obviously fill in the blanks and put the data in. As long as they can see the data structure and see how it's styled, you haven't got anything to worry about. So the first thing I want to do is show you the overall design again so that we know where we're going with this. So first of all, we have the header. So the header again has already been developed, but we do need to modify the header.php because it still contains the head.php, and that code is already being included in the profile.php page. And again, more on that in just a second. But right now, let's take a look at the content. So we have the image of the person in question, we have the name, the current position, and then also a little description down here. Now you'll notice with this text, it's aligned vertically in the center because the image is taller than the content. This can be very tricky with CSS, but in fact it's actually very easy if you know how to do this. Also, what we have is these two divs. Now again, this can get a little bit tricky because let's say that I make my browser window a little bit smaller or a little bit larger. Well, this content is obviously going to grow and shrink. Now, the problem is when you have 50% on the left and 50% on the right, these divs can go to different sizes. But I want this to be brown all the way down and also this to be 50%. So they both stay the same, so they have the same height. Now again, this can be tricky and sometimes you have to apply background images and try to do all that stuff, but we're not even going to do any of that. Again, if you have the know-how, that is actually a very simple thing to do inside of CSS. Then also what you have is this right here, which is going to be part of our UI. Now don't forget with the UI, we had our menu, but it was a lot smaller and a lot more shrunk down. This one's a lot larger, but effectively it's exactly the same thing, it's just larger, so there is no maximum width. There is no shadow on here as well for the actual entire menu item. It's just effectively a nice flat menu item, and inside of these circles we're going to have the picture of the particular individual who's made the comment, and also this entire thing is going to be a link so that when you click on it you can effectively go over to their profile page. But however, we're not going to cover how to effectively go off onto someone else's profile page because that should be implemented via the development team or the back-end team, because don't forget, once you've developed one profile page, all the other profile pages are going to be similar in nature, if not in fact the same. So that's for the back-end team to do. What you're doing right here is developing the profile page in order for the back-end team to provide that functionality. Now let's take a look at the directory and see what files I've actually included in the profile directory. So now we're in the admin directory, and inside of the profile directory you're able to see we have the profile.jpg, which is the large JPEG image here of the profile of that particular person, and then also what you have is the small profile.jpg. So this JPEG is going to be these JPEGs right here in the circles. So now that we've taken a look at that, the next thing I want to do is take a look at developing this inside of the HTML and CSS. So firstly, what we want to do is take a look at getting rid of the head.php, because with the profile.php file, it's including the head.php within the head tags, and then also we have the header.php. So obviously this content is getting repeated twice. So I want to make sure that I get rid of that and just go ahead and save it. So the next thing I want to do is take a look at the body element first of all, and we're going to give it the ID of profile. and that way we can set the background color and also the font color as well. Then inside of there we're going to have a div element, and this is going to have the ID of profile underscore header. So this is the main header at the top of the profile page. So inside of there we're going to have a div element, and the first div element is just going to contain the image right here, the profile.jpg image. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, put an image right here. We're going to target profile.jpg, and also we're going to put in the alt attribute, the person's name. Now I'm just being very generic here, but don't forget the backend team is going to have to provide this data. Then also we have another div element, and inside of that div element, what will go inside of here is the main text. So we have the header 1, which is the person's name in question. Then also we have the text underneath it, which is describing the person's position. So this is going to go inside of the strong tag, because you'll notice this text is very strong or bold. So I'm just going to copy that, and then I'm going to paste it in. Again, there's a plethora of different elements you could use, header 2 and so forth and so on, but I'm going to use strong. And then also we have the small paragraph underneath it, which gives you a quick description of the person. So then I can just copy that out and paste that in. Now I don't want to go any further than that and start developing the lower section. Let's just focus on the header first of all, and then we can move on to the lower section. Let's not complicate the markup for the sake of it. So now let's save this PHP file, take a look at it inside of the browser, and you'll notice the header is still styled because we're already loading in that head.php file. We have our image right here, which is just a blank square effectively, and then also we have our text. So the next thing I need to do is take a look at the SCSS file and start to style things up. So the first thing I'm going to do is target that ID profile, which is on the body tag right here, and then I can start to apply a background color of cream, and then also we have the font color. Now we want to take a look at the majority of the font color right here. So the majority of the font is actually going to be text 3, which is the gray text color. Only this UI element right here is going to have the white text color. So we're going to ignore that, and we're just going to focus on this text coloring right here. So we're going to set it to text 3 like so. So once I do that, you can save it, refresh, and there we go. We now have that grey text colour and also the background colour. So now it's time to focus on that main div element, profile underscore header. So let's target that ID and take a look at styling that up. So I'm going to set this to float to the left first of all, and set the background colour to white. And I'm just going to save that and hit refresh. So the reason why I told it to float to the left was because sometimes if you don't set the float on the parent, it won't correctly wrap around its child elements. So that's why I put the float in there. So the next thing we need to do is take a look at those two div elements and get the content aligned up vertically in the center, which can be very tricky, and you obviously have your padding and everything else on there, but there is an easier way of doing it, which is emulating a table cell, and it's very useful, and again we'll be using this trick throughout. And so what it allows you to do is have clean markup without having to have tables put inside of there, but you can emulate the table cell, which is very useful. So what I'm going to do is target the ID profile underscore header, and then I'm going to target all the divs that reside inside of there. Now again, I could be very specific, but don't forget these are the only two div elements that I have. You could be more specific though by saying that these div elements must be a direct child of this element with this ID, just in case we had some divs inside of the divs right here. But in this case it's not, so I can just say div just like so, and I can say display as a table cell just like so. So now we're effectively emulating a table cell, and we can also set the vertical alignment. So with the vertical alignment I can set this to middle, not center but middle, and that will align it up in the middle of the vertical axis or the y-axis. So I can just save this now and very quickly just hit refresh, and now you'll notice that this content is in the vertical center. Now you'll notice that both of these elements are divs. Now display as a table cell will work, let's say, with an image and so forth, but it won't work as well as what you think it will, because even if you tell the image to display as a block level element like the div, it still doesn't align the content in the middle. It doesn't technically understand its height. So that's where it causes complications, and that's why I've used the div element specifically and not any other element. So what I can do now is take a look at styling up this text right here, but what we need to do first of all is push it away from the edges. So what I'm going to do right here is put the ID header underscore txt. And just go ahead and save that, and the next thing I can do is target that ID header underscore txt, and then I can set the padding top and bottom to 0 and the left and right edge to 70 pixels, and so that way it will push it away from the left and right edge. Then after that, what we can do is take a look at, again, styling up the individual elements that are inside of there. But first of all, I want to come up with some general styling. So I'm going to target that ID or that div element, and then I'm going to target all of the elements that reside inside of that div element. And again, it doesn't matter what type, it's going to target all of them. And then what I can do is set the margin to 0 and also the padding to 0, because don't forget the browsers like to add a lot of default styling, and they like to add margin and padding onto the header 1 typically, and also the paragraph elements and so forth. So I'm getting rid of them. And then also I'm going to set the line height to 37 pixels. And you can find out your line height inside of Photoshop by just simply grabbing your text tool. You can select the text and so forth, open up the character panel, and you will have the line height inside of there, which is right there, 37 pixels. So once I've gone ahead and found out that line height, I can put that in there, and then you can just save this now and hit refresh. So everything is a lot more spaced out, but now we need to actually control the sizing of the text and styling. So for example, the header 1 is completely wrong. So what I'm going to do is target that ID header underscore txt. Then I'm going to target the header 1 that resides inside of there. And then we're going to set the font size to 16 pixels, and the font weight is going to be normal so that it's no longer bold, just like so. And then of course the next thing we can do is take a look at the strong tag, which is below there, so header underscore txt strong, and we can set the font size to 12 pixels. And whilst we're here, we'll style the paragraph as well, so I'm just going to say header underscore txt, target the paragraph element, and then I'm going to set the font size to 14 pixels. So I can just save that now, and we can go ahead and hit refresh. So now you notice things have got a little bit smaller and cleaner. And so now what I want to do is take a look at the bottom part of our profile page. So what I'm going to do first of all is let's take a look at the structure that we need. So I'm going to have the main div element right here, and that's going to have the ID of profile underscore main. Then inside of there we're going to have a div element with the ID of left, and we're going to have another child div with the ID of right. So we have the left and right divs. So now that I have those, we need to take a look at first of all putting in the content for the left div. Now I'm not going to worry about the right div for this lesson, but let's just concentrate on the left div. So first of all, we're going to have the header 2 inside of there, and that's going to say about and the ellipsis, and then we're going to have the paragraph element. Now inside of the paragraph element, what we're going to have is our content that I can simply copy and paste out of Photoshop into the paragraph element. And again, I'm just going to do the same for the other two paragraph elements. So now I've put that content in there, we can go ahead and preview this just by hitting refresh, and now you'll notice that we have some of our content in here. So in the next lesson we're going to continue on developing the profile page.